wanted to run, we wanted to fall together. Back then our world seemed so clear. We grew so bright, shimmering lights around us. We'd take flight into the sky. How many worlds would you cross to use the light that's right in front of you? There is no light on the other side. I say, look straight ahead and you will see. You will see. How many worlds would you cross to use the light that's right in front of you? There is no light on the other side. I say, look straight ahead and you will see.
Well, it's a beautiful day here in China for what is going to be an action-packed second round of the Trans Nation Challenge. Hello, I'm Brett Keenan. Joining me today, we've got McKenzie, Stewart, and Jonathon Carten. We're down Guy Tasker and Matthew Plevy, but Guy Tasker will be joining us in commentary in a day's time. So, boys, we're here in China, but before we get too much into the details of what we're going to expect at the Chinese Grand Prix for round 2 of the Trans Nation Challenge, let's have a look back at round 1 of the Trans Nation Challenge at the Australian Grand Prix, and we had quite a bit of an action-packed race through GP3. F1 was a fairly chaotic conclusion, and then, of course, the GP2 had a fair bit of action, but a fair amount of attrition. So, Jonathon, we'll start with you. We saw in the F1, the race was red flagged after a safety car malfunction, causing drivers to be disqualified. So that was quite an interesting turn of events.
Yeah, definitely. Being up in the commentary booth to see that, it was rather interesting. I really didn't know what to expect or what to even think of that safety car but the red flag coming out when it did, that definitely, I'm rather pleased that happened, so that way it actually gave the drivers that were disqualified their rightful positions in the race, as opposed to not actually being able to, or finishing lower due to the safety car issue.
So, of course, we will have a look at the results going by that, because, of course, the race was backdated. The safety car was, of course, brought out by Ferrari driver Jimmy 6, who crashed quite heavily into the Turn 6 barrier. So, the amended results, so we go a lap back from that, we see Black Mamba 0113 take the win for Toro Rosso ahead of Plevs from Red Bull, of course. So he's a hometown boy, so getting on the podium on his home Grand Prix was a good result for him. Narashi Uzumaki, the defending champion, in position 3, of course was position 2 at the time, but after 12 seconds of penalties had been added to his time, and only having an 11.8 second lead over Plevs saw the position swap. We see Noek 3712 finish 4th despite having transmissional issues with his car and couldn't actually return to it, but P4 through everything was a good result for Mercedes. Axel Ericsson in the Toro Rosso, second Toro Rosso, bringing up P5, and then of course we had the DNFs, which were Jimmy 6, TSO Dems, and Rabbit Donkey 96, who went out quite early in the piece. So then looking to GP2, we had quite an interesting start with Stewart McKenzie 2 pretty much leading the way for most of it, and then a few little hiccups here and there, saw drivers come into contention to battle. We saw a good battle between M. Verche and Pure Axle 2121 before M. Verche became the first casualty of turn 12. So, McKenzie, we saw this happen, and then we saw it again with Matt Your Daddy and Warlord 1313. That corner caught a lot of drivers over the weekend.
It did. I almost had a couple of accidents there myself throughout the race, but I was able to save it and avoid the wall. But I don't know what it was. Maybe drivers just pushing too hard, or getting too much exit curb and onto the grass, which caused the car to lose traction and spin. But I just hope that they're able to contend for the race for the Chinese Grand Prix, because as you said, your one guy just ran away with the whole race, and frankly, they're left everyone in the dust. But we'll have to see what happens for China, won't we?
Yeah, and then of course the GP3, which was by far one of the most close contested battles of all the three categories. We saw PMNA take victory for Williams, starting third on the grid. The only accident we had was with Big Mike 46385, and I have to say that was a very big crash into after the turn 12 incident. It was enough to desynchronize the wall and make it protrude out of the wall on the commentator side. Jonathon, saying we've been meaning to trying to ask some of the GP3 drivers, was there a wall that was glitching off the exit of turn 12 after Big Mike had his crash?
Wasn't anything that I could notice on my end. I didn't see any crazy walls that were protruding out of it. With that, like, needless to say, anything's possible.
So,
it could be such a thing as it might have been, and I just wasn't paying enough attention because I was more focused on the race than I was on anything up on the walls. I really don't know.
But anyway, we saw a good amount of pace from Ferrari in all three categories, especially in GP2 and GP3. We saw the Joker 35 take pole position almost quite convincingly, but looked like the pace of the Ferrari was also as good, but the driver's consistency kind of let him down there. But one of the standout drivers, despite the incident that happened between you and him at turn 1, was actually Banana Josh 1 in the Sauber. He came out of nowhere from the start and led the race up until turn 4 when he got on the curb and then lost the rear. But really good job for the Sauber driver. And now we've got two new drivers in the GP2 also driving the Sauber. So Sauber's starting to actually pick up its feet a little bit and get some drivers in, which is great.
Yeah, to see a team such as Sauber actually being able to get some drivers to help them out, it's really a good thing for the sport. I really hope to see more drivers, and hopefully at the point of that we can manage to get all three series actually filled up.
Well, we're currently looking pretty close to that with 16 drivers now confirmed at GP2 once again, and we have also got two new drivers in the F1 category. We've got Bruno Galvasia in the McLaren Honda and Dubsy IX in the Renault from the Ukraine. So a bit of spice happening all around the world in the field of things. And then of course we've got Carten 1979 in one of the Saubers, Betts 715 in the other Sauber, and Ian Betts 900 in the Williams. So we've had also we've also got Pure Gold from Australia in the McLaren Honda for GP2 as well. So we'll now move towards the Chinese Grand Prix, and as we do that, we'll now just cut to Jay's one lap dash around the Chinese Grand Prix circuit on board my car, so check that out.
And as he comes to start his lap here in China, he's up into 4th out of the hairpin. And as he comes into the last corner down into 4th, hits the DRS and across the line as he begins his lap up into 8th. Then he comes into the super long right-hander down into 5th and brings it down 4th, 3rd as he finishes off the right into the left. And he gets a good exit off of there, hits the gas up into 6th and to 7th. And now, as he comes into the hairpin, down in 2nd, tight turn, exit on the curb, up into 4th, into 5th, into 6th. 7th, long left-hander, pedal to the metal, down in the 5th, as he brings it through the right. 2 lefts here, into 4th, just touching the curb, up into 5th, 6th, and brings it down through here, all the way down in the 2nd, tight left-hander, right into the right, up into 3rd, puts the power down through this right-hander, up into 6th, and he exits onto one of the longest straights on that point calendar, up into 8th, as he brings it down the straight, hits the DRS. And as he comes down into the final hairpin, he brings it down all the way into 2nd gear, brings it through this last hairpin, exits on the curb, up into 4th, 5th, 6th, down back into 4th, gets a good exit off of there, hits the DRS, and across the line.
So China is one of those circuits that really demands a lot from the car's ability to turn. I mean, you look at turn 1 into turn 2, you take a very hard right, and then it follows into a very tight left. McKenzie, how hard is it to try and set your car up, knowing that you've got to try and set the car up to take these very loaded turns and not destroy the tyre as a result?
But as you're saying just before, China is a very hard circuit to set the car up right, because if you think about it as well, you got the 2 long straights with DRS where you don't want to be sluggish, like in the McLaren Honda. But moving on. No, but yeah, as you're saying, of course you got the middle sector as well that is very tight, twisty, fast swinging corners that all like connect with each other. So if you get one wrong, you've messed up the entire section. So I believe drivers will be able to set the cars up right, but of course it'll separate the good drivers from the better drivers that are able to set their cars up and continue their pace from last weekend.
And Jonathon, your thoughts about this as well?
Definitely. If it's the first 2 turns that we're talking about, that's definitely going to be the true test, just to see who can conserve their tires enough in the first 2. In those first corners, so that way, in the grand scheme of things, you're able to actually go further on into the race and not have to make as many pit stops.
And of course, we've had a lot of conjecture about the possibility of a one-stop happening in these 50% races, which hasn't, it's not completely out of the question, but it does go to say how you approach this thing. And the other thing about it too is that if a one-stop will become a possibility, of course, if there is rain during qualifying, which, around these parts it's monsoon season, so it's not completely out of the question. So we could see a bit of rain spice up the categories a little bit over the course of the weekend. So just going further along, we'll now cross over to our pit reporter Axel Eriksson, who got up a recap of last weekend's event and see what the drivers thought about the racing, and we'll come back to you after that.
So, here we are for the 3rd pit stop report of the TNC following a chaotic race in Australia, with your host, Xiri, otherwise known as Mike Jack. I had a chat with Habs for Life 634, otherwise known as Jonathon Carten. After an eventful race in Australia, he finished 7th, disappointing considering the pace he showed in preseason testing. Jonathon, like all gamers do when things don't go their way, blamed lag, saying that lag has to blame for his incident in turn 1. Having to pit on lap 1 because of damage, 7th place was the best possible position Mercedes could have hoped for. Jonathon remains optimistic, looking forward to the next race in China, where he expects to finish on the podium. I managed to get a couple of words with the current TNC champion, Narasha Uzumaki, most known as Brett. He had a disappointing qualifying session, only managing to qualify 6th. Unlike Jonathon, he didn't blame lag. Instead, he chose to put the blame on setup malfunction. In the race, it seemed like it would go much better for the number 1 Ferrari than it had in qualifying, being P3 after the first sector on lap 1. He struggled throughout the race with front wing damage, which he got on the first lap when he tangled with Rabid Donkey 96. He pitted early in order to get a new front wing as early as possible. On lap 51, Brett's teammate Gemmy 6 crashed when he pushed too hard for a race win. It triggered the safety car to be deployed, marking a start to all the chaos. When trying to pass the safety car, Brett got disqualified, even though what he did was perfectly legal. A couple of laps later, Black Mamba 0113 crashed behind the safety car because of lag, and after many people were kicked from the session, the red flag was brought out, meaning the results of the race were to be taken from the lap prior to Jemmy's crash. Brett finished on the backdate in position 2. However, after receiving 12 seconds worth of penalties, corner cutting misconduct, and only having an 11.8 seconds buffer over third place Plebs, the Ferrari driver was demoted to third upon the penalties placements on the timesheets. So Plebs, the driver that failed to set a time in qualifying and therefore started at the back, finished second. That just shows how chaotic the race was. In GP2, I had a chat with Stewart McKenzie, who won the race way ahead of anybody else. Ferrari managed to carry the pace they had in preseason testing to the first race in Australia. When I asked him about who the favorites were prior to the preseason test, he simply said that he didn't think of himself as the favorite, claiming that other teams and drivers were better prepared for the season. He says he won because of luck, claiming that the reason for his dominance in Australia was other rivals crashing early, and it being a 100% race around Australia, one of his favorite tracks according to the man himself. He goes on to say that the Chinese Grand Prix will be a much closer fight for the win, saying that that is a track where Ferrari doesn't have a lot of pace. I also managed to get a couple of words with one of the newest guys on the grid, Byrdie. The GP2 race at Australia was his first race in this league. He said he expected to finish between 5th and 7th, but ended up finishing a surprising 3rd, behind Stewart McKenzie in 1st and Pure Axel 2121 in 2nd. He goes on to say that his expectations for the next race is to end up in the top 5. So what are we going to see out of the second race at China? Stay tuned to find out.
So, one of the major questions that has been played for a lot of people, and probably a lot of us included, is Narasha Uzumaki, his title defence. Do you think Australia was a good start to his title defence? I'll open the floor to any of you, so yeah.
Jonathan, you go first.
I definitely think that a solid third place finish is a way. It's a great way to start. Even in any series, in any of them, getting a good finish at the start, it's good, but it's not how you start. So you can have a third place finish in the first race, but if you start finishing near the back, that's not going to mean diddly that you got a podium in the first race, because at the end you're not going to win a championship if you're going to finish it with that. So I'm not going to be counting my chickens before they hatch, so to speak, in saying that Narasha Uzumaki is going to end up taking the championship or maintain that form. It could very well have been luck. It all could have fallen his way, as I believe it probably did with the connection issues. But yeah, if he maintains that pace, sure, maybe he'll probably end up being champion at the end of the season.
McKenzie, you?
Yeah, as Johnson said, yeah, no, it was a very good third place for him. But then, yeah, I'll just continue what he said. Yeah, no, if he can't keep up that consistent pace the rest of the season, well then you can't really count that podium as any sort of result. But yeah, no, it was the only first race we did seem to have issues with other drivers struggling with the connection issues, as I just said. But now if he's gonna have a chance at defending that number one, he's got to pick up the pace. He's got to be able to keep up with the faster guys and not just pray that they have connection issues, because like the one race that they don't have connection issues will be the race that he struggles with his current pace.
Yeah, well, we've underlined a lot of the pace from the Narashi Uzumaki comes down to his qualifying misdemeanors. He feels like he's a very below average qualifier, but can certainly make up for it in the race. But at the same time, first lap instances can always be the determining factor, which we kind of saw in the first lap of the F1 category, where several drivers ended up being spun around, and I think as a result he got front wing damage from that. So anyway, we're looking through at the moment, and so we go from the 100% enduro races now back to the 50% feature races. So it's looking to be an interesting season so far. I mean, I would say we've seen everyone at F1 now perform in that category. In GP2 we're still seeing a few people that still need to show their hand. Pardon me, we pretty much saw a good hand of what GP3 came out through. And Jonathon, I just need to run through it. Now that you've seen that the pace of the other drivers that have been introduced over from AOR's Oceania League, do you still see yourself and Mercedes as a potential championship championship contender, or do you think now that other people have shown their hand, you've got a bit of work to do?
Pretty much how I see it is, it was especially within the GP3 category, is like I mentioned earlier, really it's still too early to say. Is like, do I see Mercedes being a competitive team? Most certainly. Am I saying that because I race for Mercedes? Heck no. Everybody, even after one race, everybody really is still in the hunt for it, because all it takes is a couple of bad races for some of the front runners, and you're going to be up there with a chance at getting into it. So, do I see myself having some work to do at this time? If I continue getting 7th place finishes, yes, I'm going to have some work to do to get Mercedes back up towards the front. But if I can, it really just time will tell more as the season goes on.
And of course, the number one key to everyone's issues about their pace is qualifying on pole position, which is generally these days quite a tricky feat with some of the drivers that we've had. So we know as far as racing goes, we will not be seeing Noek 3712 or Plebs at the Chinese Grand Prix. Both have announced they will not be driving. It is a possibility that we will see Matt Your Daddy from GP2 take Noah's seat as an invitational driver. No yet real confirmation on Plev's replacement, and of course now this is something that we've only addressed through conversation, so I'm now going to address it to the open public. So we've introduced a rule now for the Trans Nation Challenge that allows drivers from higher categories, if they cannot attend and don't want to let their constructors down, they can ask a driver from either the GP2 or the GP3 to drive in their place to bag constructors points. And of course the points given by the driver in that car will only go towards the constructors, not towards the person they're replacing in the drivers. So we saw it in, I don't suppose you could say we saw it because he didn't replace a driver, because at the time there was no driver in Renault, but we saw Erlang Dang from GP3 race in the GP2 race as an invitational, and you got to say he did an absolutely brilliant job. He drove his car so consistently. I think he let himself down on his strategy by not doing the one stop, which he could have easily done after starting on the soft. But he did an absolutely brilliant job for a GP3 driver amongst all the GP2 guys.
Definitely, he sure did him getting that him actually getting the 4th place finish in the GP2 category as someone that has enrolled in the GP3. It shows that he's going to be a driver that's definitely going to be easy to well, not easy, but hard to battle with. He's going to be somebody that you're definitely going to see him doing real well in GP3 this season. After the performance that he put in the GP2 race last week.
So, of course, we are now building up towards the Chinese Grand Prix. So we're going to end the broadcast here, but don't forget to check later on for the annotations that will show up on the Trans Nation Challenge page here for F1, GP2 and GP3, same positions as the Australian Grand Prix. Don't forget we also have Trans Nation Superstars coming up very shortly to commemorate and have a bit of banter about the Australian Grand Prix in general, so keep in tune for that. For everyone around the world on YouTube, this has been Brett Keenan, Jonathon, Carten and McKenzie Stewart signing out here at China, and we will see you tomorrow morning when we kick off with the GP2 commentary with myself and Guy Tasker for qualifying, and of course race 2 of 20 at the Trans Nation Challenge in China. Thanks for watching.